I kept two versions of my husband, and on his 41st birthday, I seated them at the same table. One was Martin, the man I kissed before work and praised for holding our family together. The other was the obedient house servant I had invented for Victor, the man sleeping with me. Victor knew Martin was legally my husband. He simply believed the marriage had died years ago. Martin believed Victor was a colleague who had helped me close a difficult search. I wrote colleague beneath Victor's name and placed the card 3 seats from the birthday cake. I was certain one dinner could not make two private stories collide. My name is Tamsin Walsh. At 38, I worked as an executive recruiter in Manchester. My clients paid me to present the version of a person that each room needed to believe. That was not lying to me. It was presentation. Martin and I had been together for 13 years and married for 10. Our daughter, Millie, was 11. Our son, Theo, was 7. Martin worked as a pediatric occupational therapist and could calm a frightened child without making the child feel managed. He brought that same patience home. He was not a bad husband. Even now, I would never say that. Every weekday, Martin woke first. He packed lunches, checked Theo's reading folder, and made my coffee. Each Tuesday, he took my father to the heart clinic, and on Thursdays, he cooked extra food for my mother. Our families loved him for it. My father called Martin the quiet center of the family, and friends used him as an example when their own partners forgot a school meeting or birthday. Their praise felt accurate, both in public and at home. I kissed Martin in the hallway. My head rested on his shoulder while we watched television. The children heard me call him the best husband because, in the ways that kept a life standing, he was. The problem was that standing still had begun to feel like the whole life. When I won my first promotion, Martin made blue cards for every difficult question the board might ask and practiced with me until midnight. Afterward, he met me outside the office with supermarket flowers because every florist had closed. I kept one of the blue cards in my desk for years. Later, I began to see the same memory differently. Martin had prepared me, solved the fear, and bought the flowers. He had done everything except look at me like success made him afraid somebody else might want me. Technically, that was not a reasonable complaint. It was still mine. If I told him I felt invisible, he checked our calendar and planned a dinner. If I said we had become predictable, he booked a weekend and created a route with parking options. When I asked if he ever worried about losing me, he said he trusted me. Trust sounded beautiful until it became the answer to every question. I wanted one argument that ended with his hands shaking because I mattered that much. I wanted jealousy, heat, and one reckless decision. Martin gave me space, tea, and time to calm down. His love never raised its voice. By the time Victor Dane entered my office, silence felt less like safety and more like being placed gently on a shelf. Victor was 39 and ran commercial sales for a property group. I met him while recruiting a finance director for his division. He rejected the first 5 candidates in less than 10 minutes each. He interrupted me, challenged every salary estimate, and called at night when he disliked an answer. I should have found him exhausting. Instead, every conversation left heat under my skin. Victor noticed when I wore a different lipstick. He asked who had annoyed me before a meeting and remembered the answer 3 days later. When I disagreed, he did not retreat into careful silence. He argued until one of us won. The first time he touched my hand, the search had closed. I told Martin I was celebrating with colleagues, which was technically true for the first hour. The affair began without a romantic promise. Victor said he did not share women. I said I did not intend to leave my family. He called that a contradiction. I called it a boundary. For 5 months, I kept both. I did not want to destroy my home. I wanted to return to it feeling alive. That distinction mattered to me more than it should have. At home, I remained the wife Martin knew. His patience interested me even when I did not need their names. Millie practiced spelling with me while he washed dishes. At night, my cold feet rested against his legs because he always complained and then warmed them anyway. Victor received a different version. At first, I told him Martin and I were emotionally distant. That was true often enough to feel safe. When Victor asked whether we still shared a bed, I said sleeping beside somebody was not the same as having a marriage. When he asked why I still wore my ring, I said children needed a stable picture. Each answer settled him for a week. Then he wanted more. One evening, Victor saw Martin's name appear on my phone while we sat in his car outside a restaurant. Martin had asked whether I wanted him to save dinner. The message included a small heart, because that was how he ended ordinary kindness. Victor asked why a dead marriage still used hearts. I said Martin was affectionate by habit. He asked whether I was affectionate back. I told him not in a way that mattered. That was the first lie I could not soften later. Victor said he would not remain hidden behind a man who still behaved like my husband. He wanted to know what Martin actually was in my life. I could have said father of my children. I could have said the man who had held my mother's hand before surgery and waited through every school fever. Instead, I gave Victor the answer that would keep him. I said Martin was my husband only on paper. The relief on Victor's face encouraged me. I explained that Martin lived in the house because he helped with the children. I said he cooked, cleaned, drove my parents, and handled errands in exchange for an easy life. The house belonged to me, I claimed, and Martin had nowhere better to go. None of that was true in the way Victor heard it. Martin and I owned the house together. He earned almost as much as I did. We had chosen his shorter clinic schedule after Theo was born because my work involved travel. Every task was part of a decision we had made as a couple. But Victor did not want the structure. He wanted rank. So I gave him one. I said Martin knew his place. After that, every good thing Martin did became material for the story. If he cooked, I told Victor my house had a reliable chef. If he collected the children, I called him a nanny with a wedding ring. If he cleaned before guests arrived, I said he understood what earned his room. Victor began laughing when I mentioned Martin. The laugh bothered me once. Then it made me feel powerful. My colleague Celia Ward knew about the affair. She had introduced us after the search and enjoyed being trusted with other people's secrets. When I told her how I described Martin, she said it was cruel but clever. According to her, jealous men needed a story that let them keep their pride. I said I was managing Victor, not humiliating Martin. Celia asked whether there was a difference if Victor ever entered our home. I told her he never would. I meant it when I said it. The family tablet sat beside our dining room shelves for school calendars and video calls. One Thursday, I signed into my messages to transfer work photographs and intended to leave after dinner. Theo needed help with a model bridge. Millie could not find her sports kit. Martin came home with groceries. The account remained open. 2 days later, I was upstairs when Victor sent a message asking whether my servant had packed my suitcase for Birmingham. The notification appeared on the tablet while Martin was checking Theo's school calendar. When I came downstairs, the tablet was lying face down beside Martin's tea. He held the cup with both hands and asked who Victor Dane was. I told him Victor was a client who still sent inappropriate jokes after the search ended. Martin placed the cup down with both hands. That was what he did when he did not trust himself to answer quickly. I had always read the motion as hesitation. He asked why a client would call him my servant. The question was too exact for a careless answer, so I made the joke smaller. I said Victor had seen a photograph of Martin cooking at our summer barbecue and liked acting important. Salesmen were like that. Martin asked whether I corrected him. I said I did not waste time defending our marriage to men who meant nothing. He looked toward the tablet. Then he asked if Victor meant nothing. I walked behind Martin and wrapped my arms around his shoulders. I kissed the side of his face and told him he was the best husband I knew. His body stayed still beneath my arms. For 1 second, I almost told him everything. Then Victor called. The phone vibrated against the counter, and Martin's eyes moved to it. I said I needed to handle the client. Martin lifted his tea again with both hands. I read the movement as him choosing peace, because that was what he always chose. Upstairs, Victor was angry that Martin had seen the message. He asked why I sounded nervous if Martin was only useful staff. I told him I disliked scenes in front of the children. Victor said staff did not create scenes when the owner of the house set rules. The ugliness of that sentence reached me. I could have ended the affair there. Instead, I told him Martin never challenged me and never would. Victor asked me to prove it. Martin's birthday was 5 weeks away. The idea began as a joke. Victor said that if the marriage was truly paperwork, there was no reason he could not attend a family event as my colleague. He wanted to watch Martin serve dinner and see whether my stories matched the house. I said inviting him would be reckless. He asked whether reckless was not what I had been missing. That landed exactly where he intended. Martin preferred family birthdays at home. He wanted a long dining table, a chocolate cake, and a playlist chosen by the children. 22 guests, 2 children, 1 secret. I told Victor he could come because our firm had recently completed work for his company. Martin had heard his name. A business connection would make sense. Victor said he wanted a place near me. I told him 3 seats away was the closest I could risk. He asked whether Martin would serve him. I said Martin served everyone. That was simply who he was. Victor replied that some men were born knowing their level. The message appeared on the family tablet before I deleted it from my phone. This time, I saw Martin standing near the screen. He had come into the dining room without shoes, carrying folded laundry. The tablet showed Victor's name and the first line about men knowing their level. Martin did not touch the message while I watched. He set the laundry basket on a chair with both hands. I reached the tablet first and closed the notification. Martin asked whether Victor was coming to his birthday. I said he was an important contact and might bring business to the firm. He asked when client jokes had become birthday invitations. I told him he complained that I never included him in my work world. Now he was punishing me for trying. That was not an answer, but it gave me the better position. Martin looked at the chair where he had placed the laundry. He said he did not remember complaining about being excluded. He remembered asking why I came home from work events brighter than I entered our own house. The sentence struck too close, so I called it unfair. He asked one more question. He wanted to know whether there was anything about Victor that would embarrass him in front of his parents or children. I said no. The lie arrived cleanly. Martin took the tablet from my hand and set it face down with both palms. He said he would trust my answer. I mistook the word trust for safety again. The next morning, the tablet was no longer on its stand. Martin said it needed an update and had moved it to the small desk in our bedroom. When it returned that evening, my message account was signed out. I assumed he had protected my privacy. I did not ask whether he had protected himself first. Celia refused the birthday invitation. We were having coffee near the office when I showed her Victor's place on the seating list. She put down her spoon and asked whether I had lost my mind. I reminded her that she had called the servant story clever. She said clever lies became stupid when their victims entered the same room. I told her Martin would see a colleague and Victor would see what he expected. Nothing had to happen. Celia asked why I wanted them together if nothing happening was the goal. I looked at the printed seating list instead of answering. The answer was not flattering. I wanted Victor to see that I controlled my home. I wanted Martin to stand beside a man who desired me and finally sense that calm was not the same as security. Most of all, I wanted to feel the secret between them, while both men believed they understood the room. Celia said she would not help me explain it afterward. I told her there would be no afterward to explain. At home, Martin prepared for his own birthday the way he prepared for every family event. He checked my father's chair because one leg had loosened. He made a separate shopping list for Theo's food allergies. He called his mother twice about transport and arranged for Hannah to bring her early. I ordered the cake and wrote the place cards. On Victor's card, I printed his full name. Beneath it, in smaller letters, I wrote colleague. The word looked harmless in black ink. 3 nights before the party, Martin found the cards drying on the sideboard. He picked up Victor's with both hands, careful not to smudge it. He asked why a commercial sales director had become my colleague. I said guests did not need a paragraph about corporate relationships under their names. Martin asked if colleague was the version I wanted the family to know. For a moment, his question opened the whole structure between us. The home version. The Victor version. The woman who kissed her husband and the woman who called him staff. I could have chosen one. Instead, I told Martin he was turning a place card into an interrogation because he felt threatened by a confident man. He put the card back with both hands. Martin said he had spent years trying not to control me and might have confused silence with trust. Whenever I asked for heat, he admitted, he had given me the practical answers he knew how to survive. That was the closest Martin had come to naming his part. His admission reached me. Victor's last voice message also remained in my memory, asking whether my husband would serve him wine. Still, I told Martin that admitting he had made the marriage feel empty did not give him the right to inspect every person who made me feel visible. He did not deny the emptiness. He only asked whether feeling visible required making him small. I said he was not small unless he chose to hear himself that way. Martin looked at me with a sadness too simple to call strategy. Then he moved Victor's card back into line with the others. I decided the conversation was finished because I had no safe answer left. On the morning of the birthday, Celia sent one message asking me to leave Victor outside my family. I replied that she was being dramatic. She did not answer again. Martin was already downstairs, chopping vegetables with Theo beside him. Millie was arranging old photographs for the television slideshow. One picture showed Martin holding both children on a windy beach while I laughed behind the camera. Another showed him asleep in the hospital chair after Theo's birth, one hand still resting on the carrier. Victor would see those photographs. I told myself he would understand they were family history, not proof of present love. Martin looked up when I entered. He asked whether Victor was definitely coming. I said yes. He dried his hands, then placed them flat on the counter. He asked if I still wanted to tell him anything before the guests arrived. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and warm bread. Theo was close enough to hear my answer. I kissed Martin's cheek and said I wanted him to enjoy his birthday. He nodded once. The answer seemed to settle him, and I went upstairs to dress. The first guests arrived at 4. Hannah came with Martin's parents. My mother brought flowers, and my father carried a bottle of whiskey he and Martin had saved since Christmas. Martin greeted every person at the door. He took his mother's coat, moved my father's chair, and checked the stairs for toys. My mother followed him into the dining room and asked whether she could help. He told her to sit because she was a guest. She kissed his cheek and said nobody worked harder on his own birthday. That sentence should have made me proud. Instead, I wondered how Victor would hear it. The television played the photographs Millie had chosen. Martin at the beach. Martin holding Theo's first school bag. Martin asleep with flour on his sleeve after baking with the children. Every picture supported the family version of him. Victor arrived 20 minutes late in a dark jacket with no gift. He held a bottle of wine by the neck and looked past me before saying hello. Martin was carrying a tray of glasses from the kitchen. Victor's mouth changed at the sight. Not a smile. Recognition. I introduced him as a colleague from a completed search. Martin set the tray down with both hands and offered his own. Victor shook it without apologizing for being late. He said he had heard a great deal about Martin. Martin looked at me before he answered. He said he could not say the same. The pause was small, but Victor enjoyed it. He handed Martin the wine as though passing a package to hotel staff and asked if it needed opening. Martin said he would put it with the others. Victor watched him walk toward the kitchen. Then he leaned near me and said my description had been accurate. I told him to behave like a colleague. He asked whether Martin behaved like a husband. Before I could answer, Millie came over and wrapped both arms around my waist. She wanted me to see the photograph she had placed next. On the screen, Martin and I stood under a red umbrella during our 10th anniversary trip. His hand was on my face. I was laughing into his coat. Victor looked at the picture. I said family slideshows were built from old performances. He asked whether I had been performing when I kissed Martin in the kitchen that morning. I told him he had not been there. Victor said he could see the mark from my lipstick near Martin's ear. One small kiss. One careless trace. I wiped it away when Martin returned. To him, the gesture looked affectionate. To Victor, it looked like cleaning evidence. The double meaning sent a quick thrill through me. That was the feeling I had invited into the house. At dinner, Victor sat between my father and Rachel, one of Martin's clinic friends. Martin sat at the end beside Theo. I took the other end, with 3 chairs and the birthday cake between my view and his. The place card in front of Victor said colleague. He turned it over once, then placed it back. Martin had made roast chicken, potatoes, and a vegetable pie for Hannah. Before sitting, he carried 1 plate to his mother because her wrist was stiff. He filled the children's water and brought my father the mustard he liked. Every act of care received thanks from the table. Victor saw obedience. When his glass emptied, he held it toward Martin and asked for more wine. He did not say please. Martin looked at the glass, then at Victor. He filled it because the bottle was beside him. Victor thanked me. Rachel stopped cutting her food. I laughed and said Victor spent too much time in restaurants. The table accepted that explanation because it was easier than naming the tone. 5 minutes later, Victor dropped his napkin near Martin's chair. He asked Martin to pick it up while Martin was helping Theo cut a piece of chicken. Martin told him there were clean napkins on the sideboard. Victor leaned back. He looked at me as if a test had produced the wrong result. I told Martin the sideboard was behind him and asked if he could pass one down. Martin handed Victor a clean napkin. He left the fallen one on the floor. My father watched the exchange. He asked Victor how long we had worked together. Victor said long enough to understand how I ran things. I answered before my father could ask what that meant. I described the finance search, the difficult candidates, and Victor's company. Work language covered the room again. Martin placed his fork down with both hands. I knew that motion. He was controlling an answer. Victor read it as compliance. After the plates were cleared, Martin's mother gave a short birthday toast. She spoke about the year Peter, Martin's father, had been ill, and Martin drove across the city every morning before work. My mother added that Martin had done the same for my father without ever making either family feel like a burden. People lifted their glasses. I called Martin the best husband and father a woman could ask for. The words came easily because they had always been true in public. Martin looked at me across the table. The sadness from the place card conversation returned for 1 second. Then Victor gave a small laugh. My father asked what was funny. Victor said he admired efficient households. No one understood the insult except me. I should have stopped him. Instead, the secret heat returned. Victor was speaking the language I had built, 3 seats from the man who had never raised his voice over me. For the first time, Martin's calm seemed to exist inside my story, not against it. The children carried paper crowns into the room before cake. Theo's crown had 41 written in blue marker. He climbed onto Martin's chair to place it on his head and knocked a glass of blackcurrant juice onto his shirt. Martin stood quickly and caught the glass before it reached the floor. Theo's face tightened. He hated wet fabric against his skin and could panic when he felt trapped inside it. Martin knelt, told him the shirt would come off easily, and began undoing the top button. His voice became low and steady. Theo watched his hands. Victor asked whether somebody was going to bring the better bottle of wine. I had promised him the Barolo we kept in the study cupboard. In the noise of the evening, I had forgotten. I told Martin to bring it. He kept his eyes on Theo and said he needed a minute because he was busy. For any ordinary couple, that would have ended the request. Victor set his glass down. He told Martin that his wife had given him an order. The room quieted around the word order. Martin looked up from Theo's shirt. He said I had asked for something. I had not given an order. Victor smiled. He said the name did not matter. Martin knew why he was there and should do what his mistress told him. Theo stopped moving. Martin asked Hannah to take him upstairs and find a dry shirt. She came around the table without speaking. Millie followed because the room had already frightened her. My mother asked what Victor meant by mistress. I laughed too quickly. I said Victor used stupid words when he drank. Victor did not accept the rescue. He told Martin to stop pretending he was one of the guests. According to him, Martin was there to cook, clean, watch the children, and do what I required. That was how he earned his place in my house. My father's chair moved against the floor. Rachel asked where Victor had heard any of that. Victor pointed toward me. Martin turned his face slowly. He asked whether I had told this man he was my servant. I said Victor had misunderstood a private joke. Victor corrected me. He said there had been no joke. I had explained that the marriage existed on paper, that Martin depended on me, and that I allowed him to stay because he was useful with the children. Martin asked why Victor needed explanations about our marriage. The question exposed the one fact still outside the room. I said Victor had become too attached after working with me. I claimed I had made the marriage sound simple to stop his jealousy. Martin asked why a colleague was jealous. Victor answered for me. He said he was the man I had chosen for the parts of my life that required a real man. My mother covered her mouth. Martin's father stared at the table. Rachel stood, but Martin raised one hand and asked her not to move yet. I could feel the room turning, so I reached for the practical detail. I said Martin did cook. He did clean. He did handle most things with the children. I had exaggerated the arrangement, but I had not invented the work. Each defense made Victor look more certain and Martin more still. Victor told him the discussion was finished. He pointed toward the study and said the wine was waiting. Martin stood. He placed both hands on the table before straightening, as though the wood were the only object in the room he trusted. Then he said he was nobody's servant. Victor looked at me and waited for a decision. I told Martin not to turn one simple request into a power struggle on his birthday. I said he had heard what Victor wanted and should bring the bottle so the evening could continue. It was not the word permission. Victor heard permission anyway. He crossed the space beside the cake and struck Martin across the face with an open hand. The sound was flat and short. Martin's shoulder turned with the blow. One paper crown fell from the table and rolled beneath a chair. A red line appeared inside his lower lip where it caught against a tooth. Chairs moved all at once. My father stood. Rachel reached for Victor's arm. Peter pushed himself away from the table while Martin's mother called his name. I began shouting that nobody was supposed to touch anyone. Martin lifted one hand. He took a white napkin, pressed it once to his lip, and asked Hannah to keep the children upstairs. Then he looked around the dining room and asked everyone else to stay seated. His voice was not loud. People sat. Even Victor stopped moving. Martin placed the stained napkin beside his plate with both hands. He told Victor that if he touched him again, the police would finish the conversation. Then he looked at me and said he wanted to hear why this man believed he was my servant. I tried to move toward him. Martin asked me to remain where I was. Victor began speaking because he still believed he had defended me. He said I had told him the marriage had ended years ago. Martin lived in my house because my parents had left the property to me. He had little money of his own and nowhere else to take the children. In exchange for staying, he cooked, cleaned, drove my parents, and followed my instructions. My father said the house had been purchased jointly and that Martin had paid half the deposit. Victor looked at me for the first time with doubt. Martin asked him to continue. Victor said I did not see Martin as a real man. I had called him household staff with a wedding ring. I had promised that Martin would never leave because he needed my life more than I needed him. Martin asked how long Victor and I had been together. Victor said 5 months. The number moved through the room without anyone repeating it. I told Martin I had only said those things because Victor became jealous. I did not want him to leave before I was ready to end the affair. The words sounded terrible, so I added that I had never planned to break the family. Martin asked whether protecting the family was why I brought Victor into it. I said I wanted one night where nobody treated me like a possession. I reminded him that our marriage had become a list of tasks. Every time I asked for passion, he gave me logistics. Every time I wanted him to fight for me, he trusted me from a distance. That part was true. Martin did not argue with it. He admitted that he had used work and routine to avoid conversations he feared he would fail. He said he had confused being dependable with being emotionally present. For one breath, the room held both of us as people instead of roles. Then he said his failure to reach me had not turned him into property. I told him Victor had taken private frustration literally. Martin asked whether the phrase household staff with a wedding ring sounded like frustration or instruction. I said he had no proof of the exact words. That was when he picked up the television remote. The screen behind Victor's chair still showed a beach photograph. Martin changed the input and connected his phone. A folder appeared with dates instead of family pictures. I recognized the first screenshot before the text became large enough for the guests. The message had come from the family tablet. Martin explained that my account had remained open on the device we used for the children's school calendar. The first notification called him a servant. The next message said men like him were born knowing their level. After I left the account signed in, he photographed only the conversation that named him, the children or the house. He had planned to ask me about it after the birthday because Theo had counted the days to the party. He had not planned to show anyone. Then Victor had struck him in front of our family. Martin opened the first image. My message said he knew his place. The next said he was useful with the children, but not someone I saw as a real man. Another described him as a cook who received a bedroom and a family name instead of wages. The fourth contained the phrase about household staff with a wedding ring. Every message had my name, Victor's answer, and a time. Martin opened a second folder. These were messages I had sent to him on the same nights. At 8:14, I had told Victor the marriage was only paperwork. At 8:22, I had thanked Martin for saving dinner and called him my best husband. On another night, I told Victor that Martin slept in the spare room. 20 minutes later, I sent Martin a photograph from our bed and asked him to hurry upstairs. Victor stopped looking at the television and looked at me. I said private messages could be made to tell any story when arranged by time. My mother asked what other arrangement could make both sets true. There was no answer that kept both men. I told Martin the loving messages were genuine. I told Victor the marriage messages had been necessary because he could not handle complexity. One man needed tenderness, the other needed certainty. I had given each of them what kept my life stable. Victor asked whether he had ever received a true version of me. Martin answered before I could. He said both versions were true whenever they gave me something. The sentence landed harder than the screenshots. I reached for Celia on my phone beneath the table. My message remained unread. Martin removed his wedding ring. He did it slowly because his knuckle had swollen over the years. Nobody spoke while he worked it free. He placed the ring across the word colleague on Victor's place card. Then he said that if I had told Victor he was my servant, I could consider the contract terminated. Starting that night, I could cook my meals, clean my house, manage my parents, and explain my own lies. He reminded me that I had never owned a servant. I had been married to a husband and had just lost him. I asked him not to leave his own birthday. Martin said his solicitor would send the divorce petition the next day. For that night, the real man I had invited could finish serving the guests. He picked up his coat. Peter and Evelyn followed first. Hannah came downstairs with the children already wearing their shoes. Theo would not look at me. Millie went directly to Martin and took his hand. My parents left behind them. My father paused beside Victor long enough to tell him that strong men did not hit people who were kneeling beside frightened children. Then he walked out without saying anything to me. Rachel and the other guests followed in pairs. No one took cake. No one finished the whiskey. Within 4 minutes, the long table held only Victor and me. I told him we could finally stop hiding. Victor looked toward the dark hallway where the family photographs had been playing. He said he had believed I was trapped with a dependent man. Instead, he had watched me kiss Martin, accept a toast to our marriage, and order him around in the house he partly owned. I reminded Victor that he had struck my husband. He said I had built the hand that did it. Then he picked up the unopened Barolo from the study cupboard himself, carried it to the front hall, and left it beside the door. He did not take me with him. The divorce petition arrived the following afternoon, along with a proposed temporary schedule that kept the children with Martin at Hannah's house during the school week. Our joint home was listed for sale after the first mediation meeting, and for the first time I had to arrange every repair appointment without Martin standing beside the contractor. My parents continued calling him about clinic visits, but stopped answering when I said they were choosing sides. Celia removed me from Victor's company account and told our managing partner enough of the truth that I could no longer use late meetings as cover. Victor sent one message saying he had wanted a powerful woman, not a woman who borrowed power by reducing someone else, and then blocked me. For years, I had called Martin's work simple because naming it love would have required me to admit how much of my life rested on his choice to keep giving it. Meals appeared. Children arrived safely. My parents reached appointments. The house stayed warm. I treated every completed task as proof that he belonged below me when it had been proof that he was holding all of us up. Weeks later, Victor's place card was still under the sideboard with Martin's ring pressed across the word colleague.